I was institutionalized at 12 and now I don't even feel human anymore. When I was 12, my adoptive family had me committed to a psychiatric hospital, and I was in the system until I turned 18. Even then I was on medication and had mandatory therapy until around 23. I won't lie, I had mental issues from early childhood trauma from my birth family, but my adoptive family also harmed me as well. I needed help, but not like that. I spent the next 7 years moving through different levels of care and security, from locked psychiatric wards, secure behavioral centers, not sure what else to call them, and even one time a minimal restrictive home which felt more like a dorm but with more rules. But the early child trauma, which resulted in me going to the ER countless times and nearly dying on many occasions, gave me PTSD and several issues. The doctors were quick to change my meds to see what would work, and unfortunately I had several psychotic breaks and relapses from reality. At this point there are large chunks of my childhood I can't remember or have suppressed. When I finally became free of the system and rejoined society on my own, I felt like an alien. I never attended high school, got my degree from credits and classes in locked facilities. Some places wouldn't let us watch the news and we had limited access to the outside world, so I feel like I missed out on so much. To this day people will make comments about things and I won't get the reference. I also acknowledge that while I was socially distant before, after being in places with suicides, fights, mental breakdowns and me being severely underweight, I kept my distance for my own safety. I'm in my 30s and I just don't understand people. I can laugh and smile, but most times I feel empty. Not depressed, I felt that before and this is not that. I just feel a void. I wake up, go to work, get home and relax. I don't want to be around people because I do understand them. I don't get the need to talk, or connect, or even find a partner. I confess I haven't had any kind of romantic or sexual interaction in nearly 12 years. I find others attractive but have no desire to interact with them. I honestly don't have any desire to find a partner or have children. To be clear, I'm not depressed or not interested in life. I just don't understand and wish to stay away from all others. Let me analyze this story for you. This is a deeply moving and quietly devastating story, one that reveals the long-term emotional, psychological, and social cost of being institutionalized as a child. Beneath the calm, measured tone is a life marked by systemic failure, personal resilience, and a haunting sense of disconnection from the world. The narrator, now in their 30s, presents their story not with self-pity or dramatics, but with a kind of worn-out clarity, the voice of someone who has long since accepted their isolation, not as a tragic flaw, but as a protective adaptation. The story begins with a crucial, painful event. The narrator was institutionalized at 12 years old by their adoptive family. This immediately signals a double-layered trauma, not only the psychological harm from early childhood and biological family, but betrayal and abandonment by the very people who were supposed to offer safety and healing. While the narrator admits they needed help, they also make it heartbreakingly clear that what they received was not care, it was containment. The next 7 years are described in clinical, almost mechanical terms: locked psychiatric wards, secure behavioral centers, minimal restrictive home. These phrases aren't just descriptions, they're echoes of a system that prioritizes structure over humanity. And yet, between the lines, you can feel what these years took from the narrator. They lost their adolescence, their schooling, their exposure to everyday life. They were medicated heavily, shifted from place to place, and subjected to conditions that included violence, suicide, mental collapse, and physical deterioration, all at a time when a child's sense of identity is still forming. Perhaps most tragic is the sense of dissociation that sets in. The narrator alludes to large chunks of childhood being suppressed or forgotten. This isn't just memory loss, it's self-erasure. Trauma, especially repeated trauma during childhood, often leads to this kind of psychic numbing. The brain learns to shut doors to survive. But in doing so, it also shuts out the development of selfhood, connection, and emotional continuity. When the narrator finally rejoined society, it wasn't a triumphant return. It was disorientation. They didn't go to high school. They didn't grow up watching the same shows, participating in the same cultural rituals, or forming the social muscle memory that bonds people together. Even now, in daily life, they feel alienated by references and rhythms they can't relate to. That kind of cultural isolation adds another layer to the loneliness. It's not just that you are alone, it's that you feel like a foreigner in your own country, out of step with the world around you. Socially, the narrator says they keep their distance for safety, a habit formed in high-risk environments where closeness could mean emotional or physical harm. This is a trauma response, but it's also something more permanent now, a part of their identity. They don't express bitterness about this fact. There's no sense of, I wish I could be different. Instead, there's a quiet acceptance, I don't understand people, and I'm okay with that. This leads to the most striking part of the story, the void. The narrator doesn't describe themselves as depressed, and that distinction is important. They're not hopeless or despondent. They don't want to die. But they don't feel much of anything, either. They describe the life reduced to function: wake up, work, rest. There's no desire for connection, romance, or family. They acknowledge finding people attractive, but with zero emotional or physical interest in acting on it. This isn't simply loneliness. It's emotional detachment, the legacy of prolonged trauma, disconnection, and institutionalization. It's not about a lack of feeling in the moment. It's about the inability to form or sustain the wiring that makes connection feel natural or desirable. What's remarkable here is that the narrator doesn't ask for pity. They're not looking for rescue. They're not even asking if something's wrong. They're simply observing themselves as if from a distance and trying to understand what they've become. There's no blame, no melodrama. Just a quiet, exhausted question underneath it all: am I even human anymore? To that, the answer is yes, unequivocally yes. What this person is experiencing is a profoundly human response to profoundly dehumanizing experiences. When you grow up in an environment where survival takes precedence over self-expression, and then spend your formative years in facilities that prioritize control over connection, your brain rewires itself to protect you. Emotional distance, detachment, lack of desire for intimacy, these are not personality defects. They are defense mechanisms that worked. But the cost is enormous. And part of the tragedy here is that the narrator has survived, but not truly lived. They become fluent in survival but not in emotional safety. Not in trust. Not in intimacy. Key themes. Institutional trauma. The narrator's formative years were spent in environments focused on medication, containment, and compliance, not healing. That environment stunted emotional development and social integration. Emotional detachment. The narrator doesn't feel depressed, but they also don't feel connected. The void they describe isn't emptiness from grief, it's numbness from adaptation. Social isolation. Years spent in psychiatric systems rob the narrator of cultural and developmental milestones. They feel out of sync with society and have little interest in bonding with others. Quiet resilience. Despite everything, the narrator is functioning, stable, reflective. They are alive, they work, they show self-awareness, all signs of deep strength, even if they don't feel emotionally engaged. Ambivalence toward humanity. Perhaps the most haunting part of this story is the narrator's alienation not just from others, but from the very concept of humanity. They're not angry. Just separate. This is not a story of failure. It's a story of survival in a system that never once made space for gentleness or joy. The narrator isn't broken, they're unfinished, emotionally paused at the moment life stopped giving them a chance to grow. And that doesn't mean they can't grow now. But it does mean that it will take time, patience, and probably the kind of safe, consistent emotional relationship they've never had.